Hi, and welcome to this week's Mortgage Broker broadcast. My guest this week is founder and CEO of Munny, Andy Lang. And Andy's onto the podcast. He actually asked if he could come on the podcast, which I love it when people ask to be guests on the podcast. I've had that recently a few times. And yeah, Andy's come to the podcast just to share his passion for financial services education. Yes, he owns a mortgage broker business, but his fundamental passion is about financial service education. And that's sort of his background. That's what he's clearly passionate about. And yeah, Andy's onto the podcast just to explain that a little bit more, what money is, how it's benefiting people in the workplace, how it's helping businesses, and it's also how it's helping mortgage brokers with regards to their clients' financial education. So who better to talk about that than Andy? So let's just get Andy onto the podcast. You're listening to the Mortgage Broker broadcast with me, Craig Skelton, the podcast which helps mortgage brokers at all stages of their mortgage broking career. So welcome onto the podcast, Andy. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Yourself?
Good, yeah, very good, thank you. Very good, thank you. Excited to talk to you because you reached out, wanted to become on the podcast. I understand you've done a few podcasts so far, got them recording, but I'm really excited because we've never spoken before. I've got no preconceived ideas. The podcast is total exploration of what you've been doing and talking a little bit more about you and what you've achieved and where you're going. And so I'm looking forward to getting to know you and your business a lot more. So I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent. And me too. Yeah. I mean, I reached out because I saw a couple of episodes, really like how it comes across, the nature, the sort of the informality of it really appeals. So yeah, should be good.
Good. We will keep it informal. We'll keep it nice and relaxed. And so first of all, I'm going to get you introduced yourself and sort of just do that brief introduction first of all. But in terms of, are you based Lancaster way, so not too far away from me?
That's right. Yeah, up in Lancaster. I moved here just over 2 years ago. I lived in Manchester for my whole life, and then we decided to take the plunge. The children are 4 and 6. We moved before they started school,
Right.
And we chose to move somewhere for our forever home, basically. So yeah, we're moved to the middle of nowhere.
I'm going to say you live in Lancaster so far. You live in being in the middle of nowhere.
Love it. Yeah, I love it. I love the peace. But it sort of helps when you have a busy week. It helps to kind of come back home and just unwind and get out of that work zone.
Definitely. Well, we'll come on to that. So first of all, Andy, do you want to just explain and introduce yourself, who you are?
Yeah, so my name's Andy. I'm the founder of Munny. Munny Group Limited is our business, and we have different parts of the business that go and deliver financial education workshops to people of all ages from all backgrounds. We have an element of the business that focuses on schools, colleges, and that side of it. So the youth, which is really, really important and a bit of a passion project for me. And then we have a corporate angle where we work with employers as part of their CSR projects or their ESG to help deliver employment and well-being to their staff.
Excellent. And I think the beauty of this, like obviously, I know when you reached out and you sort of said, "I'm not going to be a normal guest." Absolutely not. And we do like sort of exploring other thing is with regards to education and financial services. It's a big piece. It's a big thing, and obviously you're very passionate about, which we will talk about. But I think it's sort of good because there's quite a few brokers that I know that are looking at getting into that kind of side of things. So it's not totally off the wall in terms of being on a mortgage broker podcast talking about you and money and what you do, because it is relevant for quite a few brokers that are getting into education and for the benefit of their community locally, which is helping them and stuff like that. So just talk us through. Obviously, we understand now you're a family man, you've got 2 children. You're Manchester born and bred, so how did your sort of journey start in financial services?
It started early. So I left school at 16 with some GCSEs, and I mean, I'll give you a very quick snippet. We went into the careers office at school, and they said, "Okay, what is it you want to do?" And I said, "I've got no idea. Not too sure." So, "What's my friend Liam doing?" So, "Well, Liam's doing an MVQ." I was like, "All right, great. I'll do that then." And they said, well, would you like to work indoors or outdoors? And I said, I looked outside and it was raining. So I said, well, indoors. She went, great, there's the job for you. You start in 2 months. And it was a finance company in Manchester. So at 16 years old, I went across to this finance company. I had my dad's suit on that was too long. It's sort of down to my fingertips. And I walked in as a sort of spotty teenager and was in the lion's den basically straight away. So my experience was in the deep end from day one. But one of the bosses there took me under his wing as a bit of a mentor and helped me, sort of guided me through becoming a working adult ultimately. But it was a baptism of fire.
I was just going to say, it sounds like a baptism of fire. So
Yeah.
with what was you sort of doing? What was your role then within that finance company? What were you? Can you tell us what you're doing day to day?
Yeah. So it started off as admin. So I get a load of files thrown on my desk and say, put those in alphabetical order for us. So it was real, basic admin data entry, and that's how it started. And then I noticed they had a sales team doing car finance, and they were selling car loans and things to people. And I was listening to their calls just while I walked past, and it excited me. I wanted to be involved in that side of it. So I then got involved in the sales side, a bit of underwriting. So from a really early age, I was involved in kind of behind the scenes of finance and what goes into it. And I loved it. Yeah, I had a bit of a flair for it and enjoyed it.
I'm going to say you weren't put off at the early age then by the sounds of it. You did have a sort of natural enthusiasm about it by the sounds of it.
And fairly tough skin because you had to have, because it was, you can imagine jumping on a sales floor with 10 lads that are between the age of 25 and 35 and you're 16. It was a bit of a tough school of love, I guess.
But did that sort of, I'm guessing that's going to provide you with a certain different level of skills that you've still continue to use today.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of working with individuals from different backgrounds, communication skills, people's perceptions, personal brand, all those things that you kind of hear about in terms of, buzzwords in a corporate environment. It was, all those things were very early on, were kind of in my face, and learning about those. And I guess one of the other things was I ended up buying a house at 18. I mentioned my boss that was a bit of a mentor. He was like, listen, the market's going crazy. You've got to get on the property ladder. I wasn't even 18 at the time. And he was like, I'll help you. So I got a mortgage decision in principle when I was 18 years old. Went and viewed a house, bought the house. That was a bit of a car crash, that process. But I went and bought the house. And I went from being someone that had one direct debit, which was for my moped insurance, to having 12 direct debits within about 2 or 3 months. And my head fell off. I had no idea how do you manage these things, what's council tax, what's gas, what's electric, why am I paying for this, why am I paying for this? It was just in at the deep end. And that lived experience is one that I talk about quite a lot in our workshops.
Like I say, give you good life experience at such an early age. It's sort of it is having that responsibility. Like you say, no, most 17, 18-year-olds, I'll have one direct debit if they're lucky. My son's 17, nearly 18. His one direct debit is his motorbike that he's repaying me back for. That's it. So it could we'd rather sort of help him with it, going along with it and paying us back rather than paying the interest on the finance. But like I said, that's most 17, 18-year-olds right now. It's just one direct debit. Sorry, two, because he's got his insurance. So I'll give him the second one as well. So, but yeah, that's like a massive responsibility at sort of such an early age. So how long were you at that finance company for, and what sort of happened after that?
Yeah, I was there for 3 or 4 years and really sort of got into it, really enjoyed it. But I think because I'd started work at such a young age and it was in at the deep end, if you like, when I hit 20, 4 years in, I was thinking, is this it? I remember seeing one of the guys that was on the phone, I think he was in his mid-40s, and it gave me a little bit of a fright. I was thinking, is that going to be me? Am I going to be sat here now for the next 25 years? I had this sort of moment of panic.
When you're 20 years old and seeing somebody mid-40, they're old. You look back now.
Yeah. Now I realise we were super young.
Exactly,
but at the time,
start the prime. That's where they were.
Yeah. And I remember thinking that there's got to be more to it than this. A lot of my friends had gone to university and they were kind of living free and easy. And I just felt like, okay, maybe I've gone in a bit too deep, a bit too early. So I ended up selling the house for double what I'd paid for it. So my mentor was right. And that funded a world trip. I did 31 countries in 18 months. And that is where I would say my social skills, if you like, my confidence came to the fore because I was meeting people from all over the place, and living in dorms and hostels and backpacking. So yeah, that was probably my true education when it comes to working with people and being with people. But when I came back, because my CV had that finance experience, I went straight into working at another finance company. This had a element of debt advice and solvency, insurance, banking, and opened myself up to a different world and a bit more grounding, in all the various aspects of finance and personal finance.
Excellent. So when you look at, with regards to your traveling, I'm sort of taking you back a little bit. I know, but when you look at the traveling aspect of it, it is about using that, like the opportunity at that time to then gain that experience. So you've gone from, I'm not sort of thinking 18 years old, having a mortgage, having that debt. It's only a couple of years later, obviously you've not got that debt anymore, but then you're now using that to then see the world and learn even more about yourself and traveling kind of thing. So again, these layers, these foundations and the layers that you built on top of that are just building to where you are today, I'm guessing.
Yeah, absolutely. And having to budget, we're moving through country to country, the currency changed. So your math skills come into it quite quickly. If that's, 1 yen versus 25 baht, what does that equal? There was lots of maths going on to figure out what money we had or didn't have at the time. But yeah, having to budget for every day, somewhere to sleep, something to eat, because it didn't work for 18 months. So it was just 18 months of using the money that we had. That was definitely a challenge in itself, but yeah, it was an amazing experience, really good.
Excellent. So then you've had that amazing experience, 18 months, you've blown not your life savings, but you've blown your winnings, which
yeah.
done. So then you're back into the world of employment and where that's at. So what was that? What were you sort of going through at that time? Was that, again, was that long-term planning? Were you just looking at short-term stuff then? Where was your head at from a traveling point of view?
Really, when I came back, I didn't expect to fall into a role or a company that I enjoyed working for, but I did. They were called Think Munny, based in Manchester. So we had a debt management arm, an IVA business, a banking group, a mortgage group. And what was great about the company was that you could float between the businesses. You could apply to move into different roles. So you got really good experience in all different aspects of finance. But one of the things that really changed for me was I ended up going to Rwanda as part of the charity work that they do. Went and worked in a school. And on that trip, I had what I would maybe class as a quarter life crisis, where I realized, I think I want to be in education. I think I want to teach people stuff, but I don't want to be a teacher because that's really hard work and I don't know what the money's like, but I feel like I need to train or educate. So when I came back from that in 2010, I moved into the training department and I worked within the internal learning and development and was training people on money and finance and debt and how to give advice on it.
Okay, so that's 2010. So in effect, I know we're going to get to the present and where you're at right now, but in essence, sort of 13 years, you've been doing the education side of things, and it clearly you're passionate about that. But and that to say you've been doing it for 13 years and realize that at that age, especially where you were at, it's then again it's great to hear that you're actually passionate about and you found something that you wanted to do at that age.
Yeah, because if you go back to when I was 16, I had no idea, no idea what I wanted to do. So I don't think anyone does ultimately, but
No.
At that age now, probably 10 years on, I kind of knew that's where I wanted to focus. So what happened was in 2012, launched a business called Smart Lolly. And that was going into schools, teaching kids about money, about finance, about debt, about where money comes from, why we have it, how to earn it. And that for me was probably the best work I've ever done. It was just incredible. We're working with lots of different schools, going in and teaching classrooms of say 25 to 30 kids about that kind of thing, really engaging, lots of interactivity. The issue we come across in 2014, 15 was the curriculum changed. I think maths started to have some budgeting as part of it. Some of the funding changed. So our bookings started to dry up, but the bills were still there. So we had to figure out how do we get money in, while trying to work on our passion.
But the thing is, like, it is your passion. So I'm sure when you're passionate about it, you find a way, don't you? That's
Absolutely.
You have to find a way because you can't, for you, like going back to being on that floor with car finance or whatever it was, there was no way that you were going to go back there because you had no passion for that, and you got a passion for what you were doing. So, and is that, in terms of when you look back, like from where you were at that particular time to where you are now, like what sort of, like, what changes have you? And like I told you with the podcast, we will go off on a tangent and different things that will sort of, because we'll come on to where you're at. But what sort of, that's education, and finance education was quite unheard of at that point, unless I was naive to it being unheard of. But I was unheard of at that particular time about getting into schools and high schools and colleges and universities, about talking about finance and managing finance and all the things that you do. Was that, am I right with that? Was it unheard of at that stage?
Yeah, you were right. We're probably a little bit ahead of the curve, and that cost us a little bit as well, because there wasn't as much focus on it and not as much funding aside for it. So, whilst it was great and people really liked it, the schools ended up saying, "Listen, we can't book you in. We've got no time, or we've got no funding for it." So, it did get a lot tougher, because we were probably slightly ahead of the natural timeline of this becoming in. Nowadays there's lots of activities out there, lots of programs, lots of companies offering different types of financial well-being or financial advice, even in the workplace. If we go back 10 years, not many employers paid for financial well-being for their staff. That was just not the done thing. Whereas now, we're getting bookings on a daily basis from different businesses that want to give back to their staff. And one of the ways of doing that is through financially empowering them. It's fantastic.
So do you want to take us really from the journey from there where you were at that particular point to then today, before and then we get into actually what you're doing right now and the sort of driving passion behind that? What sort of, like, when did sort of the real sort of change happen to go, do you know what, firms, businesses, schools are not into this kind of thing? But then that obviously shift must have changed at some stage in that timeline. When was that, and what triggered that?
Yeah, no, good question. So when we kind of put the lid on Smart Lolly in 2015, we put it on the shelf, and it's one of those things where we're going to go back to that. We're going to go back to that at some point. Don't know when, but we'll try and get that lid off that jar. We went into different businesses. I went into a financial litigation business, so using the financial training that I'd done to help a firm with different types of financial claims. Phil, who was a business partner, went off working for charities, doing payroll giving. So we both went on different paths. But I would say last year, I'm involved in a couple of different businesses. One of them is a mortgage brokerage, which is tiny. It's just me and Sarah and a couple of people that work for us. But we started doing a few workshops in workplaces, just to try and generate a little bit of kind of giving back to the community, but B, maybe the odd lead here and there was kind of the idea. And doing those workshops, we realized the gap was still there. And if anything, the gap had got bigger. We were now talking to people that didn't know the difference between, say, fixed, variable or tracker, but also had a mortgage at 95% and 60K of debt and didn't know what to do about it. And it was like, okay, this is a real problem. There's a real issue. So we started getting requests for different types of workshops and different types of things to talk about. And can you tell us about the different debt solutions? Can you tell us about the different insurances? And our workshops started becoming more and more bespoke and more tailored, and less about mortgages ultimately. So mid last year in 22, after doing a few of these workshops, I decided that we needed to separate the two businesses and really focus on financial education, because what I didn't want to do is go into somewhere, talk about it, and then sell something on the back of it. It just didn't feel right anymore. It didn't feel legitimate, or it didn't feel the best way of doing it. So spent a bit of time in a dark room trying to create a name and a brand, batted lots of stuff around, and then Munny, Munny with the logo, that just sort of came out. And I've worked with now a designer to create the color palette, the typography, etc. And we've now got a brand that we're really proud of, and we're now delivering financial workshops across the board to lots of people. But really the trigger was last year, delivering some sort of free mortgage seminars and realizing there was a huge gap. We were getting asked questions about, how does a credit report work? What ratings are good and what ratings are bad? I've heard of this insurance called income protection. What is it? And they were the kind of questions we were getting, and we realized there was still a huge gap in people's awareness.
I think, and I'm glad you clarified, because that was one of the thoughts that was going through my head when you were talking about it, then in terms of obviously having your own mortgage brokerage, because I know brokers that do webinars at various places and presentations, but then there's the pitch at the end of it, there's the sales bit at the end of it, which is so from the way that you've explained, excuse me, from the way you've explained it there, is a very different aspect to look at it from, not from a sales pivot, it's more of a education pivot kind of thing. So, which is very, very unique, Andy, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, I was really, for me, it was one of the biggest things was that we're an education business. You know, we're not about generating income from elsewhere. Our core product is the education that we provide. And we've had meetings about it recently where we're developing something that's a bit of an AI tool that can signpost to places. And one of the questions in the meeting was about, well, could we get paid for those signposts? It's like, no, you know, that it's really, really important that our business is education, you know, and if somebody goes and gets something from elsewhere, that's up to them and that's their journey. We're just here to educate and empower people, really.
So what is it? So what's this kind of people, the businesses that you are getting involved with kind of thing? Like, is it certain departments, certain businesses, age ranges? How is it?
It's crazy actually, because every conversation we're having is turning into a follow-up and then a meeting and then a program of events being booked. It's rocketed really since sort of Q3 last year. It's gone through the roof, which is why I'm trying to get out to more people and talk to more people, because we're now getting to a point where there's 5 or 6 people out there delivering workshops. There's 5 guys behind here that work in our tech team, developing some money tech. There's so many things going on. And really the people that we're delivering this to is pretty much anybody that is employed and that works for a business. You know, we're talking to HR directors about their rewards and benefits packages a lot of the time, and they'll have on their webinars about health, fitness, diet, you know, and it's adding that financial element to it, and just making sure that their staff are not stressed about the current cost of living crisis. That, you know, you'd have to not have a TV to not know that there's a catastrophe currently playing out in terms of the inflation, interest rates, etc.
No, I do understand from being a broker, from being a business owner as mortgage broker, you can sort of see day to day the lack of education is quite a strong statement, but it's just lack of knowledge, of understanding of, because there's so much jargon in mortgage world. There's so much terminology that brokers use, because so income IP and kick and the DTA and LTAs and all the other things, WAP and TPD and all the rest of it. It's sort of from a client point of view, who are not even understanding what the difference is between a fixed and a variable and a discounted and a tracker and all the rest of it. Because brokers will see that. Brokers will reminisce, like, will understand where you're coming from, because they will see it day to day with the clients, where they're trying to educate the client from an individual point of view. But why shouldn't it be from a business point of view? Why shouldn't it be on a group level, like the webinars like you're doing? Because that's in their workspace, in the comfort of their work, like I said, business space. Then it makes total sense to. So I'm guessing the opportunity is like quite huge, really.
It's massive. You know, so we're working with a company that are based in the Northwest that are an EAP provider, employment assistance program. So they have 71,000 businesses paying for their service every month, and their service is twofold: a team of counsellors to handle any calls from their staff. So it's almost like a private version of the Samaritans, maybe. I'm not sure that's how they pitch it, but that's how it seems to me. And then the other side of their offering is access to a library of webinars and workshops. And these range from how to deal with menopause, how to deal with cancer, you know, sort of stress, anxiety and depression webinars, all sorts of different things. And when we talked to them about their financial well-being one, they had one workshop and we did look over it. It just didn't seem to be the strongest. It was really focused on the emotions attached to finance rather than practical steps. So we agreed to work with them to develop a library of webinars that focused on practical things people can do. And we've started delivering those webinars now, and we're getting bookings every day. New bookings are coming in. And these companies range from, you know, huge companies in the city centres to warehouses to sports clubs. We're working with a few different Premier League teams to work at their player care units. The opportunity is huge. And I was saying to someone earlier on that the issue I'm probably going to have at some stage is our capacity to keep up with the demand, because it's it's quite heavy lifting when you're having to deliver a lot of this stuff either in person or live on a webinar. And obviously you've got 5 or 6 people. At some stage, you're going to have to grow that. So yeah.
It's a nice problem to have, though.
It is.
That's a good problem to have. But it's the growth is about education. The growth's not about sales and 6 figures, 7 figures, turnover, profit. Like, obviously you will generate profit because you're a business and you need to, everybody has the bills to pay. However, it's very much the driving force is the education side of these things. So you've finding, like, what's like the feedback like from the firms that you've sort of delivered to so far?
Feedback's been really good, and people are looking to book in. So we have the first webinar is called Financial Empowerment and Wellbeing, and that kind of skims the topics that we're going to go into in more detail. So it covers some basics around credit rating, around mortgages, insurance, the debt solutions that are out there. And the feedback has been, okay, can we get more information on this area or this area? So the library of workshops we have is an entry-level one, and then specifically one about credit rating and mortgages and borrowing, one about insurance, one about debt, one about staying safe online with digital accounts, etc. So, we've got amazing feedback, and we do a pre and post training survey. So a survey goes out before you enter the room, you fill that survey in, and then we do one straight after the event. And one stat that comes from that survey is that entering the room, people feel 28% confident with money, and leaving the room 88% confident. So, we're getting some kind of hard data around the impact that we're having.
And that is massive. Like I said, if you're getting the hard data and showing, and clearly you are having impact with the feedback that you're getting. What are the, obviously you've had feedback from the firm. What's the main benefits of a firm looking to work with you and your team to focus in this area?
For me, one of the biggest things is people being more confident with it. We, in one of our earliest workshops, somebody sort of stayed behind afterwards and said, I didn't put my hand up because I wasn't sure what to say. I was like, okay, well, what is it you want to know? And basically they had a gas bill come through on their email that they didn't want to open the email. They just left it flagged because they didn't know what to do with it. They didn't know how to handle the numbers on it. They didn't know if it was going to go up, how they would handle that. They didn't know if it was going to go down, if that was good or bad. They just didn't know how to handle it. So we sat with them, opened up the email. I think it was a £45 a month increase. So we helped them to engage with the power company, the energy company, Scottish Power it was. And they managed to agree a payment plan that was a bit more in line with their budget. Now, that level of support isn't the norm. Normally we're delivering information and people then go and use it. But ultimately, the biggest benefit is people should feel more confident in handling the numbers, handling their finances.
Rather than sort of burying their head in the sand, which a lot of people, like I say, do. The reality is a lot of people do that because it's just the lack of understanding. I'm guessing one of the things I'm thinking with regards to the benefit of from a firm's point of view must be productivity from their business point of view. I think that's a sort of, because if you've got a workforce that is stressed, worried about, got outside pressures, and bringing those to work because it's just natural that they will bring those sorts of things to work with them, then productivity from that business point of view must be affected if you've got people dealing with outside personal stresses.
Absolutely. And people are distracted by it. It's on their mind a lot. Money is one of the biggest reasons for divorce. It's one of the biggest reasons for stress and anxiety and depression, because it's tough. There's no escaping right now that the way the economy is and inflation and now interest rates, it's crippling a lot of people. And when you hear the government say we need to just get a bit more used to being poor, or we need to just drive through this problem, well, that's not okay for a lot of people. Ultimately, that advice doesn't really help the majority of people. There's some really frightening statistics about 9 out of 10 people with less than £100 left once they paid all their bills. How are those 9 out of 10 people supposed to deal with that, and on a month-to-month basis? So, what we definitely can't do is wave a magic wand, but what we can certainly do is make people feel less stressed, less anxious about it, and really be a bit more forthright with it. Because ultimately, and you'll know this as well, if you pick up the phone or if you send an email and you start engaging with the process, engage with your creditors, there are ways to deal with everything. Every situation that you have can be dealt with through a conversation. So it's about making sure people feel confident enough, empowered enough to have those conversations, really.
Definitely. I think the thing as well is that they trust you as an individual and as a firm, that you are helping with their education, and you are like the example you gave a little bit earlier about engaging with Scottish Power. I know, and you sort of said that's like a bit above and beyond what you normally
Yeah.
do. Absolutely not. You're not going to start every single webinar you're going to do, and then you start bringing every
Yeah.
provider up. I think you will need a workforce a lot quicker than what you start saying if you're going to look at doing that. But I think it's like you say, that is up and beyond. But it's just, it is for them. You're giving them the trust, you're giving them the tools, you're giving them the terminology and the knowledge and the education that they need to then to be able to pick up the phone and engage, because with that provider, that with that person, because what tends to happen is people are always scared of not knowing. We always want to be it's the not knowing kind of thing. We always want to feel as though we know it, like we know as human beings, as our brain. We don't like the uncertainty. We don't like picking up a phone to somebody or communicating to somebody some way where we've got literally no understanding whatsoever, because we will kick that down the road, and we'll kick it down the road because our brain will just deal with things we're comfortable with, going to work. Another bill comes in, we'll kick it down the road because I don't want to, I don't know what I need to say about that. I don't know how to deal with it. And all these, and it just sort of then builds up until it gets to an unmanageable, but you said something that there's always I forget the exact words you use, but there's always a solution. There's always it's just dealing with it, isn't it? It's just, rather than kicking it down the road, burying your head in the sand, it's just dealing with that situation, which people make that choice. They either choose to deal with it or they choose not to, and it just builds up then to far more than what it needs to be.
Absolutely. In our backgrounds, everyone that operates within the trainings part of the business are all FCA qualified in some way, whether that's as an IFA, insurance, mortgages, whatever it may be. And there's three of us that worked within a debt advice business for 8-9 years minimum, and then someone there with 15 years. And we've seen examples of people that have let it fester, have put their head in the sand, and it's just snowballed into a situation now that is much more stressful and much more difficult to deal with. And the overriding theme of all of our conversations previously was, I just wish I knew this previously. I just wish I knew I could deal with it like this previously. And there's always that moment where the sort of trigger to them calling has now to be something quite serious, like a bailiff knock on the door, a missed mortgage payment, a repossessed car. There's always a really serious trigger. Whereas if we're able to identify 9 months earlier, okay, things are a little bit tight now because I've done my income and expenditure. I know that I'm a little bit tight. I need to do something about it. If we handle it there at that point, there's so many more options that can be utilised, and that's what it's about, really.
And that the thing that is it. It's just the options for the client. But just I'm like thinking from that client's point of view. You give the example. Let's say 9 months. They've had 9 months of worrying about the same thing every single day in, day out. What sort of 270 days as an average of just going through the same worry, because that's what they will just naturally worry about. That they will worry about the same thing day after day after day, which mentally and the mindset wise, mentally, it will affect you. It will have an effect on your overall well-being.
Absolutely. And still now money's a bit taboo. People don't really talk about it with friends or family and even partners. Again, past experience, we know there was a few times people would ring us up because their partner had just left the house and they were calling now because they weren't there. Then they came back and they'd hang up. And, ultimately you have to be really open about this. Everybody has money coming in and everyone has money going out. Sometimes the math doesn't work. Sometimes it does. But the more we talk about it, the more it's not a taboo subject and we just discuss things openly with our loved ones, for example, then the more in control we'll be. And I definitely think that we're trying to destigmatize it and just make it a little bit more open and a little bit more, of an easy topic to discuss.
I think, and the thing is, like you say, money is very taboo. People will talk about their money to very few people, and it's as a broker, and it's relevant to what you were sort of saying there. Is like when you sat down with a customer for the first time, you want these people to open up to you and tell you exactly how it is, which people feel uncomfortable doing that. So if they've been through this education piece with yourself, Then I'm a mortgage broker, sat down with my clients, being fortunate enough to be on one of your webinars and part of what you've done. They're going to be open. They're going to tell you how it is from the very start, because they're comfortable talking about the finances and the issues and things like that. And you're trying to break that down as a broker. When I was a broker, the first thing I'd be saying to clients, look, I've pretty much seen everything. So just tell me how it is. The only way I can help you is by you telling me exactly how it is. Because if there's things that will come out, things you don't tell me, I'm going to find out anyway. So it's just saves a lot of time and effort, a lot of money sometimes. Let's just get it all out in the open. Tell me the situation, and I'll get you the solution. Like you said there's always a solution.
Always,
I'll get you the solution to the problem. But if I don't know what the problem is, or you try and disguise it, or you try and hide it, it's going to come out. And I'm sure, as I was when you were sort of saying there about, I'm smiling, but really it's not it's unfortunate that people are in the situation where they can't talk. Like partners' point of view, we will get calls after saying, do you know when I said my credit card was $2,000, it's actually 7. We will, do you know what I mean? And so that's going to come out. Like if you're borrowing money together, that is going to come out at some stage. So it's having that, but because, like you say, it's educating them to be comfortable to talk to the partners about finance, never mind a complete stranger that they don't even know. And I think any education will really benefit the whole industry, which clearly you're passionate about, and obviously you've seen that as an opportunity, Andy. But I think you can so when you reached out to me initially and said, I'm not your normal lender, your mortgage broker, anything like that. But then I thought, well, actually, no, this really does benefit. When I started to research more about your business, like this does really benefit every single person within the financial services world.
Not 100%, because people, I'll have it, and you'll have had it, where you'll talk to somebody and they'll tell you the answer that they think you want to hear. So and you get a lot of it, don't you? Especially around sometimes house value. If you're looking at a mortgage, they might say, "Oh, it's definitely worth 250. It's the best house on the street." And then you'll go through the process, and it's worth 225 maybe, and that affects everything. So the more people are open about things and just comfortable talking about things, the better. And it is just all about trying to give people a bit more confidence, and not feel ashamed or not feel embarrassed or not feel any of those things that we seem to feel. And it's not just, I know we focus a little bit on the sort of negatives of maybe debt and that side of it, but it's everything. It's everything from making the right choice. Somebody asked me, how does income protection work? I thought that was PPI. It's like, well, no. And you explain it, and that education piece means they're going to go and get that from somewhere now, and they're going to buy a product that's right for them, which means a broker somewhere will sell them something that's right for them, and advise them on it. So every single aspect of somebody's finances, right away from savings accounts and pensions, investments. We do a bit about crypto and what to avoid and what to be aware of, right the way through to insolvency, IVAs, bankruptcy, DROs, and all those solutions that are made available. So every walk of life, somebody can benefit from being a little bit more aware. And sometimes we give examples. So we'll talk about, you have driving lessons and a driving test, then you get to drive a car. You don't have that with money. You just get given a credit card and an overdraft, and away you go, and no one's sat down and gone, okay, well, this is how you do this is how you do that, and this is what not to do. This is where you slam the brakes on. And it should all start with a household budget and income and expenditure. That's where it should always start. And from that point onwards, you can then decide, well, what do we need to put back on? Where do we need to spend more money or less money? And if you haven't got that information, it's very difficult, isn't it? As you'll know.
Definitely. So it certainly is. I think, like I say, it's just, I think just any education, like you're talking about products a little bit in there, we will see it. Brokers will see it. We'll sort of understand. Like we talk about income protection. Well, I've already got one of those, and it turns out to be something totally different, or it might critical illness cover, and they're thinking that they've got that when they haven't. And I think that's the thing as well, is that they may have got something off the shelf that they thought they was buying when it's not been right for them, and that's where the broker comes in. But if we're doing it at source, like you're doing in terms of as early in the process as possible, and not when it comes to actually meeting up with a mortgage broker, that can just be sort of a massive benefit for everybody concerned. Have you sort of got, and we'll talk about future in a second, but obviously you're working very much on employers and business and like that. Have you done anything or any plans with regards to colleges, schools, anything like from that point of view?
Yeah, so this is kind of where I guess if I look back now at Smart Lolly and what worked for us but didn't work for us on that business and where we are now, what we've learned is how to scale this properly and how to build a foundation that's going to make it a long-lasting, sustainable business where previously it wasn't. So we now have Munny Partnerships, which is our corporate arm, and we work with all our corporate businesses through that. We have Munny Skills Academy, and that works with colleges, apprenticeship schemes, MVQ providers to support the work that they're doing. And there's a scheme called Multiply, which is a government scheme, which is all about numeracy. So they put a funding line out there to help people become more confident with numbers and more confident with maths. And we've spoken to a number of different local councils, charities, and training providers about providing them with our support on that, which is going really well. And then we have the Munny Foundation, which is where we deliver to schools, primary schools right the way through to colleges. And really that's the passion. That's where we'd love to spend all of our time and energy, but ultimately that's not where the money is, because schools, I'm a school governor for the school that my children go to, and we had a meeting not long ago where we're talking about who can buy gravel for their playground because there's no money in the pot, and parents having to buy bags of gravel because, the school just don't have the funding available. So, what we're trying to do is partner with corporate businesses that want to give back to their community. They can pick the schools that we go to and they can fund that work. And obviously it means that we're working together to educate the future, which is really where we need to get. It's okay now educating adults that are in the mix and have credit cards and loans, but if you get in there when someone's 15, 16, 17, they're going to enter the working world with a much, much more grounded and solid foundation to start work on.
Absolutely. I think it is getting down to that really grassroots kind of education from that point of view, because then they say you need to tackle it further down the chain like you are at the moment, and you sound like you've got every part of the process sorted out. And that's the thing, is educating the people that are in that situation to try and deal with that, what situations they're in. But then again, it's educating their children and from that point of view, understanding, like you say, it's a good way to look at it from you get a credit card, you've brand new credit card, you've got £1,000 credit limit. Well, you go out and spend, but it's just then how you manage that and what you do with it. And I think it's sort of, like you say, if you were given a car for the first time without any lessons, without any license or anything like that, the streets would be certainly different to what they are right now.
You'd crash it, and there would then be a sort of car crash crisis rather than a cost of living crisis. And I think that's the thing as well. We've identified that there's some real basic tools that exist. We're not having to reinvent the wheel. There's lots of stuff out there that exists. For example, credit card repayment calculators online are incredible tools for people to use. If they've got a credit card, they can tap in their interest rate, their balance, the payment, and it tells them exactly what it's going to cost if they keep doing minimum payments. And it's a free tool, and it's so useful for people to use. Overpayment on mortgage tools, I'm sure you've used it yourself. That's an amazing calculator, because it's sometimes can be shocking the difference that £50 a month can make. So sometimes it's just about letting people know there are tools out there that have been developed, that will make a huge difference to your financial circumstances.
I think with those as well, the powerful thing with them is they become visual, so people can see what the impact it has. Whatever the situation is, it shows them the impact, and they can visually see it, and brings it a little bit more to life than what it is just talking about it. So
absolutely.
So you've talked about a little bit about the difficulties of scaling and where you want to go with this, but so what does the future look like for Andy and for Munny?
Very exciting, actually. So in the building that I'm in here, we've got a tech team of 5 wizards, they're absolute geniuses, and we're probably a week away from having a ready-to-use system that we've been developing. I always get it wrong, so I won't try and over-explain it, but ultimately it involves 5 plugins that are API related. There's a vector in the middle of it that's been trained and controls all the brain of it, and it's an AI money coach. So where we're delivering the training currently through webinars and through face-to-face, that's great, and that really works. And where people are picking up the phone and asking for certain help on certain things, that's great. But you mentioned earlier, people maybe won't pick the phone up, and people will be a little bit more kind of reserved or ashamed or shy about it. This is an app they can go onto, they can tap in a question, it gives them an answer, and the stuff it can do will blow everyone's mind. I'm sure people have been playing around with ChatGPT and other types of AI. It has some of that in it, but it's just incredible. I'll give you one very quick example. We tested it out with a chap who was trying to negotiate with his creditors to get his interest frozen or just to agree a lower payment. He wasn't able to get anywhere. And you type in the information and it produced a letter for him, a templated letter that he could then just email straight away to his creditors. And it had in there consumer duty, it had in there treating customers fairly, it had in there all these different rules and regulations were quoted. And all of that has been because it's been trained on all of those things over the last 3 months. And we're going to make that available very soon through sort of licensed agreements with our business partners that we have. Really low cost and low entry point, but we think that could be a bit of a game changer once it's live. So
sounds
exciting
like
times.
I'm really excited about that. That sounds awesome.
It does. Yeah.
So I'm surprised you weren't shouting about that from the start. And to be fair, like straight on the podcast like that. I mean, you've been dying at you all the time.
I've been asked not to say too much about it because we're just a little bit, are people going to sort of jump ahead of us in the queue? But yeah, we're really close. Last week was a working demo. There's a few tweaks to make to it, but visually it's really nice and simple, all on brand. It's called MEM. So that's the bot that you would be speaking to. We're really excited about getting that launched in the coming weeks, hopefully.
Excellent. Andy, it's been great to have a chat to you. It's been great to clearly see your passion for the education piece for financial services. So really pleased that you reached out and sort of got yourself a slot booked on the podcast. So pleased about that, and hopefully it's gone well, and with the other podcasts as well in terms of promoting your passion for what you're doing. But Andy, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sort of sharing your passion and being a guest on the podcast.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Craig.
Thank you for listening to the Mortgage Broker Broadcast, the podcast which helps mortgage brokers at all stages of their mortgage broking career. If you have any questions about this podcast or any topics you want us to discuss, or if you're interested in working with me further, then please get in touch.